Hey everyone, and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm all about those stories where the underdog wins, where a little bit of planning and a whole lot of not putting up with anyone's crap can bring the sweetest kind of satisfaction. And trust me, this one's a doozy. If you like stories like this, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. It all started with the trip of a lifetime. My husband, let's call him Mark, and we'd been saving for years to go to Italy. Tuscany, specifically. Rolling hills, vineyards, the whole romantic shebang. I pictured us, laughing, sipping wine, exploring ancient ruins, the perfect escape. Mark, bless his heart, is generally a good guy. Thoughtful, kind, a little oblivious sometimes. He's the kind of guy who'd happily help an old lady cross the street, but who also might, and I stress might, forget your birthday. He wasn't a bad husband, just, sometimes a little preoccupied. And I was used to being the planner, the organizer, the one who held everything together. I booked the flights, researched the hotels, made restaurant reservations, the works. I wanted this trip to be perfect. So, the week before we were supposed to leave, I was buzzing with excitement. Packing, checking weather reports, going over my carefully crafted itinerary for the 100th time. I even bought a brand new Italian phrase book, determined to impress the locals. I'd spent hours poring over travel blogs, bookmarking restaurants with the best views, and mapping out hidden gems only the true locals knew about. I wanted this trip to be ours. I wanted to experience the magic of Tuscany, not just as tourists, but as a couple intertwined with its beauty. The scent of lavender sachets filled my suitcase, mingling with the crisp newness of a silk scarf I'd bought for myself. I envisioned myself, strolling through the sun-drenched vineyards, the vibrant colors of the Tuscan landscape painting the backdrop to our love story. I already had the perfect picture in my mind, Mark and I, hand in hand, lost in each other's gaze, sharing laughter and secrets as the sun dipped below the horizon. Then, the bomb dropped. We were at dinner, a casual Tuesday night affair. We were at our favorite Italian restaurant, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the flickering candlelight. The aroma of garlic, basil, and simmering tomato sauce usually filled me with anticipation, but that night, the air felt thick and heavy. Mark was unusually quiet, staring into his pasta like he was trying to solve a complex mathematical equation. He was twirling his spaghetti, oblivious to the world around him, as the rich scent of the bolognese sauce, usually a source of joy, did little to lift the atmosphere. Finally, he looked up, his eyes avoiding mine. The flicker of the candlelight danced in his eyes, adding to the uncertainty that washed over me. So, he began hesitantly, "There's something I need to tell you." My heart lurched. I knew that tone. This was never a good sign. He had this habit of prefacing things that made my heart ache, things he knew I wouldn't like. It was a clear indicator that the gentle, kind Mark was about to do something incredibly thoughtless. "Okay," I said, bracing myself. My fork paused mid-air, the half-eaten pasta now unappetizing. I took a sip of my Chianti, the taste of the wine bitter on my tongue. The warmth that had blossomed within me, fueled by the anticipation of our trip, began to recede, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. "Remember Sarah?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah. The ex-girlfriend. The one he'd dated for, 5 years before we met. The one who, according to Mark, was just a friend, but who, in my opinion, still had a lingering hold on him. The one who, if I was being honest with myself, I was perpetually wary of. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. It was as if the walls of the restaurant were closing in, the lively chatter of the other diners fading into a dull hum. The scent of the food seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. Yes, I remember Sarah. My voice was clipped, the enthusiasm I'd felt just minutes before now replaced by a tightly wound tension. Well, he continued, picking at his breadstick, his gaze fixed on the crumbs on the table, she's coming on the trip with us. I blinked. Did I hear him wrong? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My mind struggled to process the information. This couldn't be happening. Our meticulously planned, long-awaited romantic getaway, ruined? What? He winced, expecting my reaction, I'm sure. He knew. He knew what this meant to me. She had a last-minute cancellation from her own trip, and, I thought it would be nice if she could come with us. We can, split costs. And it would be fun. For everyone. My mind reeled. Fun. Fun. This was anything but fun. This was a disaster. It was as if Dee told me he invited a rabid badger to join us. It was the ultimate betrayal of my excitement, my planning, and frankly, our marriage. It felt like he'd punched me in the gut, completely deflating all the joy and anticipation I'd been holding onto for months. I felt a surge of anger, a hot, searing wave of resentment that threatened to consume me. Mark, I said, my voice tight, trying to maintain control. My fingers clenched into fists beneath the table, as I fought the urge to scream. Are you serious? This is our trip. We planned this, we saved for this. And you just invited your ex? His cheeks flushed. I know, but, he trailed off, searching for the words, but his eyes remained averted. He mumbled something about how it would be awkward if she couldn't come, about how he'd already told her, about how he thought it would be a great way for us to all get along. Get along? He thought I would get along with his ex-girlfriend, on a romantic getaway for us? I could practically feel my carefully constructed dreams crumbling around me. The perfect escape, the romantic getaway, the Tuscan idyll, all shattered into a million pieces. The carefully curated fantasy I'd been holding onto was suddenly replaced by a stark, unwelcome reality. That's when the red mist descended. The rest of the conversation was a blur of raised voices, hurt feelings, and thinly veiled accusations. I argued, he pleaded, and eventually, I gave in. I didn't want to ruin the entire trip before it even began. Plus, I was still hoping it was some sort of horrible joke. Maybe he'd break the news to her, and it would all blow over. But as the days counted down, I knew the reality of the situation was quickly solidifying. The days that followed were a blur of barely controlled fury and simmering disappointment. I tried to reason with him, but he seemed genuinely oblivious to the depth of my anger. He downplayed the situation, insisting it would all be fine, that we could all get along. His well-meaning but ultimately clueless assurances did nothing to soothe my wounded spirit. The flight to Italy was excruciating. I remember the cramped seats, the stale air, and the constant hum of the airplane. It was supposed to be a journey of excitement, but I felt nothing but dread. Sarah sat in the seat across from me. She was fine. Attractive, dressed in stylish, expensive clothes, and sickeningly polite. Her carefully coiffed hair and perfectly applied makeup grated on my nerves. Every time she offered a comment like, "Oh, the food is just divine," or "Italy is truly magical," I could almost taste the eye roll forming in my mouth. Her voice was overly sweet, her mannerisms just a little too perfect. It was as if she was deliberately trying to highlight everything I wasn't. The hotel was lovely, the Tuscan countryside breathtaking, but the air was thick with tension. I recall the lush green landscape rushing by the taxi window as we made our way to the villa. The rolling hills, the rows of vineyards, the cypress trees. It was undeniably beautiful, but the beauty was tainted. The breathtaking vistas couldn't erase the sting of betrayal, the feeling of being an outsider in my own marriage. Mark spent an inordinate amount of time chatting and laughing with Sarah, leaving me feeling invisible. He'd laugh at her jokes, hang on to her every word, and make a point of ensuring she was included in everything. Dinner conversations were strained, filled with inside jokes and shared memories from their time together. Every shared glance, every lingering touch of the arm, was a knife twisting in my gut. I was relegated to being the outsider in my own vacation. I remember the first day we arrived at the villa. It was a beautiful, sprawling place with a pool overlooking the Tuscan hills. The smell of jasmine filled the air, and the sun warmed my skin. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to feel any joy. Mark and Sarah were already deep in conversation, their heads bent close together as they looked at photos of the vineyards we were about to visit. The first few days, I tried to be civil. I attempted to join in on their conversations, to be friendly, to find some common ground. I attempted to smile and make small talk, but it felt forced, unnatural. But it was impossible. They were a unit, a couple who had a shared history, and I was the third wheel. I tried to distract myself. I explored the villa, read books by the pool, and walked around the nearby town. But every time I saw them together, my anger would rise. I felt like screaming. How could he have been so selfish? So thoughtless? One evening, we were all sitting on the patio of our villa, sipping wine. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The warm Tuscan air, usually so inviting, now felt oppressive. We were drinking expensive Italian wine, but the taste was lost on me. Mark and Sarah were deep in conversation, laughing over some memory. I wasn't privy to. As I watched them, I felt a surge of white-hot anger. Their voices, the tone of which held a familiar intimacy, seemed to be tuned out from reality. It was then, as I sat there, simmering with resentment, that a plan began to form in my mind. A delicious, wicked plan. This wasn't just about the trip. This was about Mark's utter obliviousness. It was about his lack of consideration for my feelings. It was about his blatant disregard for our marriage. It was about reclaiming my sense of control, and frankly, about getting a little revenge. The key, I realized, was to use something he'd forgotten. Something from the past, a secret that I was in possession of. Years ago, when Mark and I first started dating, we moved into a small apartment. It was our first place together, and we were thrilled. We pooled our resources, pooling everything to make it our own. Mark had a double bed from when he lived with his parents. It was a bit old, a little saggy, but it was ours. Fast forward a few months. Things were going smoothly. We were young and in love. We spent countless hours together, laughing, exploring, and building a life. We'd spend nights in, watching movies, sharing secrets, and making plans for the future. We were still building our life, still building our bond. Then, one night, Mark came home, looking sheepish. His usual sunny disposition was replaced by a look of sheepishness, of guilt. "Honey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I have something to tell you." "Oh, here we go again. Another one." I immediately knew what that look meant. It was the prelude to something unpleasant, something I wasn't going to like. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. "Well, I've got a problem with the bed," he admitted. His gaze flickered around the room, avoiding eye contact. "I can't fit in it." I blinked. "You can't fit in it?" We'd both slept in the bed for months. It wasn't exactly a tight squeeze, not that I could remember. "Yeah," he said. He was visibly uncomfortable. "I've been restless, you know. And I've been waking you up. The bed's just not big enough." And that was that. We decided to get a new, king-sized bed. I never understood why he'd said that. He'd always been a decent size, but I'd never paid much attention. The bed, for whatever reason, was the reason for the shift. But unbeknownst to Mark, when we moved in together, I'd paid for the bed. He had a habit of forgetting about those sorts of details. He'd often make up his own stories, and I always let it go. There were so many things that he would simply overlook. It was always just the way he was, and I'd learned to love him for it, quirks and all. So, as I watched them, bathed in the Tuscan sunset, I decided it was time to remind him. And to remind him, the hard way. The next morning, I feigned a headache and stayed behind at the villa while Mark and Sarah went on a guided tour of a nearby vineyard. I told him I needed a little extra time to relax, to recuperate. Secretly, I was thrilled to have a few hours alone to execute my plan. Once they were gone, I smiled and began to execute my plan. I needed to be careful. I wanted this to be flawless, and I didn't want any leaks. I called the hotel staff. I had already been friendly with them, leaving generous tips, making sure they knew I was the one paying for the room. I told them a story about how my husband had bought the wrong-sized bed, and that it was ruining our vacation. I emphasized that it would be best for me to have a separate bed, to get some peace. After all, they'd been very friendly, very helpful. I wasn't very demanding. I explained that I'd been suffering from terrible back pain, and that sharing a bed with a restless sleeper, like Mark, was simply not conducive to rest or recovery. I lamented that I would love to enjoy the trip, but the pain was getting worse. I pleaded for their help, suggesting I might be better off in another bed. They were more than happy to oblige. After all, I had been nothing but friendly. They'd enjoyed my generosity. A few minutes later, they informed me that they had brought in a single bed into their room. After all, I'd been so kind. This was no problem. It was a beautiful gesture, and exactly what I'd wanted. When they returned, the villa looked exactly as it should. Everything was in its place. Except for one minor detail. A single bed nestled discreetly in the corner of our spacious master suite. The new arrangement, I imagined, would add a new layer to this vacation. I waited. The anticipation was almost unbearable. The hours crawled by. I busied myself with trivial things, trying to appear nonchalant. I tried to appear as if I didn't have an ace up my sleeve. The anticipation began to wear on me. Later that day, after a long afternoon of sightseeing, Mark and Sarah returned to the villa, beaming. They had the post-vineyard glow. Their voices, filled with laughter and shared memories, echoed through the courtyard as they headed inside. "I'm going to take a quick shower," Mark announced, before disappearing into the master bedroom. Sarah followed a few minutes later. I decided to make some tea. As I placed the kettle on the stove, I heard a blood-curdling scream. I froze. The sound ripped through the quiet villa, shattering the false calm. It was a primal sound, filled with pure, unadulterated shock and dismay. The scream was quickly followed by a series of exclamations, a jumble of words I couldn't quite make out. But the tone was unmistakable. Alarm. Shock. Panic. I feigned innocence, allowing the appropriate amount of time to pass. I took a deep breath, carefully feigning to be startled. I slowly walked into the master bedroom. I saw Mark standing there, staring at the bed. His face was a mask of bewilderment, his jaw slack. His eyes widened in an expression I hadn't seen in a while. He looked dumbfounded. Sarah stood beside him, her mouth agape, her eyes wide. The smile had completely fallen off her face. "What?" Mark stammered, pointing at the bed. "What is this?" I took a deep breath, fighting back a smile. I carefully took a step towards them, feigning concern. I maintained a composed, sympathetic expression. I had to deliver this perfectly. "It's a bed, darling," I said, my voice dripping with sweet innocence. My eyes gleamed with suppressed laughter. I had put a lot of effort into my performance. A very comfortable, single bed. Mark looked from the bed to me, his eyes finally connecting the dots. A realization dawned on his face. It was as if the pieces were falling into place, and he was finally beginning to see the bigger picture. But, where am I supposed to sleep?" he asked, his voice rising in volume. "Well," I said, my voice taking on a playful tone, "you could always sleep on the sofa. Or maybe Sarah could sleep in the single bed." The color drained from Sarah's face. I had never seen anyone look so utterly deflated. The smile had been wiped off of her face. Her elegant composure was now replaced by a mixture of surprise, dismay, and a hint of anger. It was absolutely perfect. Mark turned to her, his eyes filled with a confused concern. He looked conflicted. The tables had officially turned. I kept going. "Or, since I own the bed, and it's our room, I guess you could, sleep in the single bed, too." I paused for emphasis. "Unless you prefer separate rooms? I hear this villa has some lovely single options." The silence in the room was deafening. It was filled with the unspoken tension that had been building throughout the trip. It was as if the very air had become thick with the weight of unspoken words and unacknowledged slights. Mark was staring at me, his face a mixture of shock, confusion, and a flicker of dawning realization. He'd finally figured it out. The pieces had started clicking into place, and he had finally realized what I had done. He began, searching for the right words. I smiled. A slow, deliberate, utterly satisfying smile. I had successfully orchestrated this moment. I had meticulously planned every detail. And now, it was playing out exactly as I had imagined. "Yes, Mark," I said. "I did. I own the bed. And now, I'm enjoying my own personal space." The look on Sarah's face was priceless. She was clearly mortified, the facade of casual elegance crumbling before my eyes. The smugness was gone, replaced by a palpable discomfort. The carefully constructed image she'd been projecting was falling apart at the seams. The trip's aura had officially shifted. The balance of power was now firmly in my favor. Mark eventually mumbled something about needing some air and retreated to the terrace. He was probably still trying to process what had happened. Sarah followed soon after, muttering about needing to check her phone. That night, I slept soundly. In the big, comfy bed, all to myself. The sheets were cool and soft against my skin. The silence of the villa was broken only by the gentle rustling of the leaves outside. I slept peacefully, knowing I had reclaimed a small piece of myself. The next few days were different. The dynamics of the trip changed. The awkwardness still lingered, but it was no longer directed solely at me. The tension had diffused. Mark was subdued, contrite. He kept apologizing. He was more thoughtful, and he started making more of an effort to include me. Sarah was distant, and the shared jokes and lingering touches all but disappeared. She spent most of her time away from us. It was a welcome change, and I could not have asked for more. It was as if the air had been cleared. I spent my days exploring the local villages, visiting the markets, and savoring the delicious food. I took long walks through the vineyards, breathing in the fresh air, and feeling the sun on my skin. I started to enjoy the trip. The revenge had tasted sweet, and I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that I had asserted myself and taken control. By the end of the trip, Mark was practically begging me to forgive him. He promised to never invite his ex on a vacation again. He vowed to be more attentive, more considerate, more everything. He promised to do everything in his power to make it up to me. He was doing his best, and I appreciated the effort. And Sarah? Well, she spent the rest of the trip mostly avoiding us, and I could not have asked for more. She was now completely silent, and I didn't mind. The flight home was a welcome relief. As we touched down on the tarmac, Mark turned to me, a sheepish look on his face. He knew he'd messed up. So, he said, hesitantly. About the bed. I raised an eyebrow, feigning indifference. I knew he had a lot to say. Yes? I've learned a valuable lesson, he said. His eyes met mine, full of sincerity. I'll never forget this. I smiled. The corners of my mouth curved up, a genuine smile. I had one. I'm glad. Because, honestly, Italy was still pretty great. And it was. The revenge was sweet. The feeling of having finally been acknowledged, respected, and seen was even sweeter. It was the ultimate satisfaction. The best part? We're planning another trip next year. This time, it's just the two of us. And let me tell you, I've already made the reservations. It was a promise he'd made. He'd already shown a lot of effort to make up for what had happened. So, what do you guys think? Was I the a-hole? Or did Mark and Sarah have it coming? Let me know in the comments below. And, hey, if you've got your own Reddit revenge stories, I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. Until next time.